All right, welcome once again to our Road to Paris series here on Black Rosie Media. Erica L. Ayala, joined by AJ McCord. AJ, I mean, we've crossed paths for sure in the women's basketball space, but I have been enjoying your TikTok content on surfing so much. I've learned so much about what to expect in Paris in particular. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on. I'm so excited to officially do something with you because like we said, we've crossed paths a few times and I love your series. I love everything that you're doing with Black Rosie Media. So it is an honor to be on with you today to talk a little surfing.
I appreciate it. Yes, for sure. And I feel like I'm going to learn a lot. Hopefully, our listeners will learn a lot. And of course, we'll know how to follow you in all things surfing and beyond. And we're going to get into that. But first, anytime I have a one-on-one interview, I'm just wrapping and, chopping it up with someone. I like to start with what I call the brown sugar question because it came from the movie Brown Sugar. So, AJ, when did you fall in love with sports? And specifically, when did you fall in love with extreme sports and surfing?
Yeah, great question. I love starting off with this because I'm also obsessed with everybody's journey into how they got into this crazy industry. So for me, surfing, I grew up in San Diego, California, and so I literally have pictures of being on a board with my dad, within a few months of being able to walk, probably. I think the youngest I was 2 or 3 at the first picture, and so I've been on a board my whole life. That said, I knew that I wanted to be in sports media probably 16, 17, 18. My mom, my grandma were diehard NFL San Diego, emphasis on San Diego Chargers fans. And so that's what I knew growing up was women watched sports in my family, women knew football in my family. And so without even realizing it, my parents and my family had really set the stage for sort of shattering some stereotypes of women in sports. And, I was growing up in the 90s, early 2000s. And so that was something that was unique. And so I got into surfing that young. My sport that I really chose to pursue competitively was gymnastics. So I did that until I was 18 and had some injuries in competitive that forced me to quit and not go past that into college. But in college, I looked again to the extreme sports. I went to a college that I could surf at all the time. And then I was a whitewater rafting guide in college. And that really changed the trajectory for me of what I found thoroughly enjoyable. And it was the outdoors. It was the extreme sports. I'd always really loved surfing, but whitewater rafting opened me up to an entirely different world. So my playground is the outside. I love being outside. I still do gymnastics. I do, especially when the trials are on and the Olympics come around. I'm oh yeah, let's see what we can still do. Turns out the answer's not much, but I thoroughly enjoy going back to the gym. Otherwise, my day in, day out is I love being outside and playing in nature. It's my favorite thing. So if there's something outside, sign me up.
Well, it sounds like you found the perfect job as far as being able to be a sports media host, personality, overall, just journalist, and be able to be outside, which again is pretty cool. I mean, that's really the dream, but I'm sure it comes with its ups and downs. What have been some of the lessons that you've learned over your time now that you're on the other side in the media? I mean, media, I'm not going to lie, AJ, I think you can attest, we get to do and go to some pretty cool places, but the grind is also very real.
For sure. Yeah. And I think so. I came from local sports. So that's how I sort of cut my teeth in sports media was straight out of college. I had a really great job as a writer researcher for the Olympic Channel. And I got to do all the prep leading up to Sochi and really get to know those athletes. And so that really solidified for sure, yes, is the industry I want. However, I was a writer researcher and I decided hey, I don't really love dressing up, getting on camera, all that jazz, but I really like finishing what I start. And so what I found in that job was I love doing all this research, but then handing it off to somebody else to do the interview or, present it was actually something the control freak in me thoroughly did not enjoy. So I decided to go on camera. And I got my first job in local sports in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Spent the next 8 years in local sports. I did Fayetteville, Arkansas, and then Portland, Oregon. And then the last few years, I've gone freelance. And that's like a whole different journey in and of itself. As you know, it's just like an entirely different animal. But I always tell myself I would choose this hard over the hard that I was having towards the end of my time in local sports, because in local, it's really fun. You get to go so deep within a community. You get to tell some really amazing stories. But then there's also this element of like, you're still fit within a newscast for the most part. And I was finding that it didn't give me enough time to tell the stories that I wanted to tell. And for me, that's the heart of why I got into this in the first place is, I remember watching the sideline reporters with my mom, my grandma, watching every single Chargers game. And I remember being like, wow, this is so cool because these women, right, like your Andrea Kramers, your Alex Flanagans, like they were on the sidelines telling me more about the human being underneath the jersey. And so all of a sudden, I got invested in players who weren't on my team because I knew something about who they were as a human being. And I really believe that that is the power of sports, is that it presents this platform for people of all different walks of life, all different backgrounds, all different everything, right? And yet, for this 2-hour, 3-hour period, we're all watching the same thing. And so how do you take that 2 or 3 hour period and make it more impactful than just the result of the game? And for me, that's about trying to find a way to tell you the story of the human being underneath the jersey. And so that's what I decided I wanted to do. And so I took the jump, I went freelance, and literally the first person to call was the World Surf League. And it was a company that I had wanted to work for forever. But I was never in a spot to go freelance before. And so got my first shot with them in 2022 in Huntington Beach at the US Open. And it has been a dream job ever since. So they're like my primary, the primary team that I work with freelancing is with the World Surf League. And I've been so lucky. It's taken me all over the world, which is a grind and a joy. And but like I keep telling myself that if you can increase your percentage throughout the career, right, of like, I like this percent of the job and this percent of the job is hard, then that's a great thing. And like, each step of the way, I've improved my percentage. So like right now, I would say freelancing, I'm at like a solid 85 to 90% of the time. I like thoroughly enjoy my job. And then 10% of the time I have to do like bookkeeping, and I really don't like that. And so I think for me, that's like the grind is like, when I was young and starting out, like it was really closer to like 60-40. I didn't love the job to like what I liked about the job. And I've just tried to increase it every single time I take a step or make a move. And so I'm super stoked to be where I am now. I'm so lucky. And I know I've worked very hard for it, but I also know there's been a lot of people who've opened these doors for me to provide the platform to have these opportunities. So I'm really, really grateful.
Wow. I love so much of what you just shared in that story. I can relate to a lot of what you just shared in that story, including the storytelling element. And that's why at Black Rosie Media, we really prioritize focusing on women in sports. Of course, that's the athletes, the executives, the coaches, and all of that. But of course, it's also the storytellers, because you talked about that. There's just a little bit of a different angle, a little bit of a different flavor or spice that women more often than not are being able to give when it comes to what we consider traditional sports media. And I say women and I focus on women, but I think that's really any group that unfortunately is still very much underrepresented when it comes to a media core. And having just that different perspective can often open up athletes, as I'm sure you've noticed in all of the work that you've done. So I love that. And I know that you said you're at about 85%, which is pretty solid. I think, I love what you said, I'll take this hard. And it sounds like we were talking off air a little bit, but it sounds like you're doing some things, and you've got some things in the works that are going to push you to hopefully get even beyond that 85%. So what are some of the things that now, being a freelancer, that you're exploring when it comes to the storytelling and having that autonomy to, as you said, from beginning to end, soup to nuts, be able to craft that story and that idea and then bring it all the way through to being able to press play and hit record and then push that out for sports fans to enjoy?
Yeah, I'm so excited. This year I like went one step further from freelancing and I said, you know what, I'm going to start my own thing here because I have been in the action sports space. I've been watching it for years and years, and then I have been able to work some of these events in the last 2 years, 3 years ish. And so I have decided to launch my own. I just launched my own women's sports brand, and it is called the PowHERful, which is PowHErful, because we are highlighting powerful women in extreme Olympic and outdoor sports. Because again, for me, nature is not just a sporting, like a field of play, right? But it is really a place that I find a lot of healing. I find a lot of myself. I find a lot of calm, and it is a place that I feel the most authentically me. And so I feel like these women who have turned those playgrounds into careers are some of the most impressive human beings I've ever gotten a chance to meet. And it's not just because of what they're doing in their sport, but it is because of how little support they have in those sports, right? Like, we've covered women's sports for a long time, and I am so freaking glad that it is having its moment. And the WNBA, the NWSL, right? These huge leagues, well, these big leagues, we shan't say huge yet because we still have work to do, but these leagues are finding their footing, and these women who are coming into these leagues are finally making enough that they don't have to have second and third jobs. The reality is, in extreme sports, in Olympic sports, that is still the case. Like, these women have to have these other jobs in order to sustain their dream of becoming an Olympian, of becoming an extreme sports athlete, in order to try and get those sponsors out there, or while they're waiting for the sponsors, whatever it is. And so for me, I really want to make sure that these women's stories get told, because to some extent, right, like the Olympic sports, the extreme sports, these are things that a lot of us do just casually, right? Like, I surf all the time. I'm never going to make it to the Olympics in surfing, but there's more people surfing now than ever before. COVID really brought a lot of people to the ocean who'd never experienced it before. And how do I tell you the story of these people who have made it their career? And some of them are competing in the Olympics, but there's like a whole other division of big wave surfing that there's no plans to make it in the Olympics because it's way too unpredictable, and we have no idea when the ocean's going to cooperate to give us big enough waves to consider a big wave, right? And so for me, this is something that I'm really passionate about, is telling the story of women who are in these extreme sports, in these Olympic sports, and making sure that, especially in an Olympic year, right? Like, we're going to meet so many incredible athletes, men and women, who are competing in the Olympics and the Paralympics this year. How do we catapult this Olympic spotlight and almost create a halo effect on the back end, so that maybe the people who are competing in Paris 2024 don't have to have as many jobs between 2024 and 2028, so that they can dedicate full time. And that provides an opportunity, right, for the next generation to see that this is a legitimate professional career, and like, you can make it here. You don't have to have all these other jobs if that's not what you want to do. And so that's why I started the PowHERful. I'm super excited about it. We've got podcasts coming out each week highlighting women who are competing for Team USA in both Olympic and Paralympic sports. And there are some badass women that I've gotten to know through this work that I just cannot wait for people to hear more of their stories. And so, that's what we're jumping into this summer.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Like, just yes. I mean, that's how I can just summarize how I feel. Like, I'm ready to smash the play button to listen to your stories. And again, I followed your coverage and your content on TikTok in particular. And I get to see some of this, the passion and how you are able to break down everything from where the Olympians are going to stay when they compete in Paris 2024. That's actually not in Paris. And what surfing is all about. And that's where I kind of want to go, because you talked about outdoor sports, Olympic sports, and extreme sports. And I would classify personally surfing as all three. It checks all of the boxes. You even talked about big wave surfing. There's so many great documentaries. I have a sister. She's actually the same sister that is directly responsible for getting me into sports media. Hi, Jessie. Shout out to Jessie. But she got me into extreme sports as well. And just following some of the podcasts and the documentaries, and like the storytelling is pretty epic already.
Yeah.
But to your point, there's still so much when it comes to the economics and how that then gets to the athletes themselves that needs to be told. So let's start with surfing and how it becomes an Olympic sport. Because to your point, big wave surfing is going to be difficult to get in the Olympics, but there have also been conversations on how to just get surfing in an Olympic Games at all. So how was Paris able to do it? What can we expect for 2024?
Yeah, so actually, Paris is the second time that surfing is going to be in the Olympics. It was in Tokyo in 2021 at this great beach break, and an American, Carissa Moore, won surfing's first ever gold medal in surfing. And Chris is going to go back to back, or try to go back to back this summer in Paris. But the reason I put air quotes around that is because, so a little behind the scenes of Olympic qualification or Olympic venues, right, is like the city puts forth the bid to host the Olympics. But then within each sport, there are venues that say, hey, we're the best fit for this, we're the best fit for this, et cetera, down the line. So what happened with Paris 2024 is one of the places that put themselves up for a bid is actually Teahupo'o, which is in Tahiti, French Polynesian island, and the spot of some of the most iconic surf contests in the history of surfing. This wave is so incredible, and Tahiti is stunning. And so they won the bid to host the surfing event for Paris 2024. So that's where all these surfers are going to be competing for a gold medal in just a few weeks, is in Tahiti. And when I say this wave is beautiful, it is beautiful also because it is one of the most dangerous waves in the world. And so I'm trying to think of a great analogy, but like Tokyo was a beach break. So think of like anytime you go to the beach, right, you see these waves, and not to say that there aren't beach breaks that should be taken seriously, but there's a difference between a beach break and a reef break. Tahiti, Teahupo'o, that wave breaks on a reef. And so what that means is this wave is formed over the top of a very shallow reef. And as you might imagine, coral reef, especially live coral reef, is very, very sharp. And so that's what makes this wave one of the most dangerous ones in the entire world. It also makes it the spot for some of the best ridden waves in the entire world. There have been surfers who have been going to Chopes, as its nickname. And so there have been surfers who've been going to Chopes for decades just to try and learn this wave. And so that's where the Olympic surfing is actually going to happen. I think it's something like 3,000 miles away from Paris, but it will be in Tahiti. It's the very first part of the Olympic window. So look for it. I believe the window opens from the 27th to the 4th. 27th of July to August 4th. And that's when you can watch it. So that's the other unique thing, is like it's a window, because again, we like to control everything, me in particular. However, no one's going to tell Mother Nature when to show up. And so they'll have kind of some built-in buffers, if you will, within that window, so that they can wait for the best waves to show up and to give everybody a chance at seeing the best surfers in the planet in these waves.
Wow. So there's this window that they're hoping to hold the competitions in. So that would be for men's and women's, or I should ask, so what are the different, I suppose, like surfing categories, and how is it broken down in surfing when it comes to the competitions that we can expect in Paris 2024?
Yeah, so it's just 2 divisions, men and women, 24 athletes in each division. And this is just shortboarding. So I mentioned big wave. There's also longboarding. There's also parasurfing. Like there's so many, we could go on and on. But for this Olympics, there is competitive shortboarding, and it is a men's division and a women's division, 24 athletes in each of those. And so how it's going to work is there's 6 rounds of competition. The first round is 3 surfers in the water per heat. And so each heat is anywhere between like 15 and 40 minutes. It really depends on how consistently the waves are coming in. And they make those calls like the day of. They decide like, okay, the waves are coming in this consistently, so we can have 20-minute heats. Like I would be surprised if we see a 15-minute heat with 3 surfers. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's 3 surfers in the first round. The winner of that moves on to the 3rd round. The 2 who do not win that round then go into the 2nd round, which is essentially the elimination round. And so that becomes a head-to-head competition. So now from the second round on, there's only 2 surfers in the water. How they're judged is on their 2 best waves, but you can catch as many waves as you absolutely want to within the heat. And you see a lot of strategy come into play with how many waves a surfer takes off on, whether or not they sort of go for the biggest waves right at the beginning, whether they sort of build their scores up. So you'll see a lot of strategy involved in when the surfers take off, how they take off, the waves that they're looking for. But then after that second round, the winner moves on to the third round, and then the loser is eliminated from competition. And then rounds 3, which is essentially like the round of 16, 4, 5, and 6, it's all single elimination. And then it goes into the quarters for round 4, semis for round 5, and then the gold medal round is round 6. The semifinals are going to be then competing for the bronze medal match. Or the losers of the semifinals compete for the bronze medal match. So that's the very, very basic breakdown of how surfing is going to work in the Olympics, but they're scored out of 10. So think about like when gymnastics, before they went to their new scoring system, you can get perfect 10s. If chokes is going off the way that it has in competitions past, absolutely, there can be perfect 10s because these barrels are absolutely beautiful. So this is like a barrel is like, think about the wave coming over you, like you're standing in a barrel. That's what we call a barreling wave. And that's certainly what chokes provides. And the WSL put on a beautifully, beautifully done event, the Shiseido Tahiti Pro, just in May. And it was a really good precursor to this Olympics because a lot of the people who are going to be competing in Paris 2024 competed in that competition. And so if you want a little bit of like an insight into this wave, I would recommend going back and watching that on worldsurfleague.com because it was so cool. And the wave showed up and the surfers showed up and it was iconic.
I love that. And it sounds like I'm really excited. Like I said, I've been watching like these documentaries because of my sister Jessie. And so I know like a little bit of what you laid out there. Definitely heard of the barrel and like how different, like, as you said, the beach breaks versus the reef breaks and stuff like that, how they impact the wave and stuff like that. Okay. So another question that I have, because all Olympic sports are different. And on the women's basketball side, we've definitely been learning that because Caitlin Clark not only did not make the traditional 5-on-5 roster, but a lot of people were like, okay, well, you know, Cam Brink is out. Let's put her on 3x3. And it's like, whoa. 3x3 has a whole point system. They have qualification tournaments, etc. How do you get to the Olympics to qualify and compete for Team USA?
So there are 2 primary ways to qualify for making it in the surfing Olympics. So the first is through the World Surf League. They are a tier 1 qualifier. And then the second is through ISA. They have events. They have like the world championships and things like that. So we've had surfers qualify through both avenues, if you will. And then for each country, typically you can have 2 surfers. Now there's a situation where like Team USA women, they have 3 surfers who've qualified because there was an extra spot earned by them through the ISA. And then Brazil also has an extra spot on the men's side because they qualified. They got that through the ISAs. So it gets a little complex, a little convoluted because then there's also all these countries that don't have enough sort of they didn't do well enough within like the ISAs or have enough representation on the WSL's championship tour to make it so that they have 1 of each. But like, for example, on the men's side, you have Ramzi Boukiam, who is going to be competing for Morocco. You have Rio Aida, who's competing for Indonesia. And so there's like examples where a country only has 1 surfer and sometimes only 1 surfer in 1 division, like either a man or a woman. So it gets very convoluted, but a lot of these surfers that are going to be the favorites for winning a medal in Paris are ones that have made their mark on the WSL, either championship tour, which is the top tier of WSL competition, or on the Challenger Series. And really the reason that's like the next tier down, everybody on the Challenger Series fights to qualify for the CT every year. And the 2 people that you should watch out for in particular who are coming out from the Challenger Series are 2 local Tahitians. And so they have actually earned their qualification. They'll be representing their home country in France, but they are both from Tahiti. Vahiné Fierro is this badass, amazing Tahitian woman, this amazing Tahitian woman who actually won the WSL Shiseido Tahiti Pro back in May. This girl has built her career at the end of the road, which is the town right next to Teahupo'o. And so she is one of these women who just charge at all times, and she won the event just a month ago. So this is like her home break. And then on the men's side, you have Cowley Bost, who is from the end of the road, like from this tiny town right next to Teahupo'o. So those two are sort of the local favorites. And as you might imagine, home field advantage, if you will, home break advantage, a very legitimate thing in surfing, especially with a wave like this.
Wow, that's so exciting. And then, I mean, obviously on Black Rosie Media, we also are empowering melanated people who too often their stories are underrepresented. And so to hear that there are people that are going to have, as you said, kind of like that home court, home water, home wave advantage.
Home break.
Home break. There we go. Home break advantage. I mean, that's super cool. And like the Olympics is all about, I mean, it's not lost on us that there are a lot of bigger storylines that are very corporate that come with the Olympics, but the raw emotion that we see in the Olympics is very real for a lot of the reasons that you've already mentioned, including in extreme outdoor Olympic sports, that the pay structure is not necessarily there for all of these athletes. And so to come through, and be able to represent, your home country, that has to be thrilling and exciting. So I'm glad you put those two surfers on our radar. Before we get you out of here, AJ, and hear what your plans are going to be for covering Paris 2024, I have to ask, whether it's US surfers or just others in the field, who are some women that we should be watching in the women's division who you think have a really great shot to really just put on a great performance and perhaps hit the podium?
Okay, so I already mentioned Vahiné, and then this may sound biased because obviously I'm from San Diego. I'm the state, I've been from America. So, but really Team USA, all three of their women, you have to watch out for. Carissa Moore won gold in 2021 in Tokyo. And so she's looking to go win back-to-back gold medals. She has put in a ton of time out in Tahiti at Teahupo'o. She's also a native Hawaiian. And so she has spent a lot of time at Pipeline, which is another one of those big reef breaks that has the barreling opportunity. And so not that the waves are identical at all, but if you have a lot of experience in these big barreling reef break conditions, you're going to have a leg up in Tahiti. So I would watch out for Carissa, absolutely. Katie Simmers is from San Diego, California. She absolutely loves the barrels as well. Watch out for her. Caroline Marks won the event in 2023 when the WSL was at the end of the road. So keep an eye on Caroline Marks. She also is coming off of her very first world title win. So those three are absolutely ones to watch. But outside of the US and Vahiné, Tatiana Weston Webb is a Brazilian woman who had a perfect 10 in May when WSL was at the end of the road. And so watch out for Tati. She is a charger. She absolutely refuses to back down. And then the last one I'd have to shout out, I mean, I could go through the entire 24 and tell you something about every one of these women, but I shan't do that for the sake of time. But the last one that I have to call out is Molly Picklum. She's competing for Australia, and she's another one of these women. It's so cool that it's an Olympic year for surfing, for women's surfing in particular, and that it's at this venue, because women's surfing is really having a moment this year in the world of pro surfing. We saw these women just step up massively at Pipeline, which was the first competition on the WSL CT this year. They just were going, think of heavyweights going blow for blow, but these women are going against the ocean, right? And so Pipeline was massive, it was firing, and these women stepped up. And the thing is, Teahupo'o from 2006 to 2022 actually did not host a women's event there because it was deemed too dangerous and a safety hazard to have women competing there. The men continued to have events, but the women did not. And now before 2006, there were some unbelievable women who made history charging at chokes. Keala Kennelly is somebody that people might know because she was actually, her mainstream tie-in is that she was actually in Blue Crush, that fantastic surfer girl movie from all those years ago. But she was the first woman to toe in, which means you get towed into a wave at chokes, back in the early 2000s. And so there were women who were making these massive marks and proving that women could surf this wave. And yet it didn't have a women's competition for more than a decade. And so the return of women surfing to chokes for the Olympics in this year, where the women have been out in these waves that are massive, that are barreling, that are dangerous, and proving like, no, we can hold our own. It's going to be really fun to watch in the context of the Olympics and in the bigger picture of women surfing, and these women really like shining in the limelight, if you will.
Wow. So, I mean, you gave us again so much there, AJ.
I know, I have so much to say.
No, I love it. And that's exactly why I wanted to have you on, because I know enough to know that this is an electric and exciting sport, while also knowing that I don't know much about it to be the expert. And that's why I love being able to bring on people that not just know the sport, but have a passion for the sport. I mean, we really try to pride ourselves on finding experts in their field. And so when I knew I wanted to have a road to Paris and focus on surfing in particular, I knew that you were the person that I had to have on the program. And now is a chance. You've already mentioned that you have a podcast coming, but I want people to be able to lock in with what you're doing so that they know how to get expertise and expert coverage, I should say, of the surfing tournament. So AJ, how can people tap in with your content, what can we expect from you in late July?
Well, so definitely stay locked in on TikTok. I also would love any questions because I grew up in this sport. And so I understand it is one of those sports that if you don't have any context for, it is hard to understand. So please feel free to ask me any questions on TikTok on any one of these videos. But then I'm super excited to share that I will be on the ground in Tahiti. And so I will have your coverage in person. So stay locked into my social media, and I'll have a little bit more to share about where else you can find the content in the coming weeks. But I will be on the ground in Tahiti covering these surfers, and it just, like, it still doesn't feel real to me to say that out loud. But I have a plane flight, so it's got to be real.
I freaking love that. I mean, we cover athletes, we see how emotional they get when they qualify. But, you know, I shared when I got to go to Beijing that I mean, I'm not a crier, you know, I let one thug tear go and that's about it. But like the emotions are super raw. When I got the email saying that my credential was in the mail, I've like fell to the ground. There's just, I mean, again, you shared a little bit about your journey, but I just want to honor all of the hard work that you've put in, all of the passion that you share through your content. And I'm so thrilled for you that you get to cover this Olympic sport in Tahiti. And I think it's going to be amazing. And I cannot wait to tap in and follow what you're doing. So AJ McCord, thank you so much for joining us here on Black Rosie Media. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy covering the Olympics, and we'll have to talk on the other side of the tournament and see how everything went down.
Back at you, sis. Hold it down in Paris for me. I cannot wait to see all the things that you do. Thank you for having me on.
Of course.